And with that, welcome you inside this midweek edition of Big Ten Today, presented by Old National Bank. I'm Rick Pizzo. We're going to check at some of the Big Ten's dark horses heading into 2024. Plus, how much pressure is Lincoln Riley on at USC? All those topics and much more as we dive into this week's edition of Big Ten Today. But first, want to introduce you to a new member of our Big Ten team as we say hello via the magic of cyber television to Ross Dellenger. Ross is familiar to anyone who has read anything about college football over the past decade and a half, 2 decades. He's been a beat writer for multiple teams, worked for Sports Illustrated, Yahoo Sports now as well. Ross, welcome in, and what a phenomenal time to be starting with us here at the Big Ten Network in a year setting up to be like none other in the history of the Big Ten.
Well, it's great to be on. It's great to be a new member. I can add it to the resume, Big Ten Network, and like you said, an incredible year to be starting this, right? It may be the most anticipated college football season in recent history. Expanded playoff, new conference memberships, right? All this realignment, and I'm just happy to be on with you guys.
And we will dive into the new college football playoff, all the restructuring, what it means not just in the Big Ten, but for college football as a whole. But we begin, as we often do, with today's big story, taking a look at the big-time question so many teams have at quarterback this season. A year after the position was as good as we've potentially ever seen, only 4 starters are back, and that includes Cade McNamara. You'll find out in a little bit why McNamara may not be the starter when Iowa opens its season in 2024. Do all the math. You'll know that 14 teams will open their respective seasons with new starting quarterbacks. And with that in mind, change brings with it, Ross, a lot of uncertainty, but it brings with it an opportunity for us to see new faces emerge. And I don't think there's anywhere where attention will be more focused on a new young quarterback than in Lincoln, Nebraska, with Dylan Raiola. He comes in with all the hype. We've seen him through the course of spring. He is now installed as the likely starter as we get into fall camp. What intrigues you the most about what we could see from this young guy in Lincoln?
Well, we all remember the spring game, right? Everybody got a good look at this 5-star prospect rated by many of the top quarterback out of this past class, and he looked like it, right? I know it's just a spring game, right? But 16 for 22, I think he went over 230 yards passing. Showed just that lightning quick release, Rick, and looked effortlessly throwing the football. I was talking to some folks at Nebraska actually yesterday. Buzz out of camp on him. It's all the cliches, right? Maturity beyond his years, right? Patient in the pocket. Things you don't necessarily often see from young players. He seems to be showing, at least in camp and at least in the spring game. It's another another step up when you actually face real competition, but he's looked the part. And then, Coach Matt Rule, of course, trying his best, right, to tamp down the hype and expectations. Tough to do that, though, with such a talent.
And also tough to do that when you look at a freshman quarterback, Ross, and no matter how good you are, as a freshman, that quarterback is going to make mistakes. So I think it's going to be interesting for us to watch, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, how Matt Rule and the rest of that offensive staff balances the need to be more explosive in the pass game with the understanding that if you ask Raiola to do that, that means they're going to make more mistakes. And it's mistakes that's really kept Nebraska out of the postseason the last couple of years.
That's right. Turnovers specifically, right? I think Nebraska was dead last in the Big Ten and maybe among power conference programs in turnover margin last year, -17. That's got to get better. When you have a freshman quarterback, you have turnovers, right? You tend to have a lot of turnovers. But I think what any freshman, any rookie quarterback has to do is once you make that mistake, right, is get past it and move on to the next play. You hear coaches often say, next play, we're moving on. And that's what it's hard sometimes for, I think, young players to do that. Can Dylan Raiola do that? He's shown, like I said, in fall camp, that maturity. Maybe he can kind of move past that mistake and not make too many of them. Nebraska does not need to be -17 in the turnover margin if they're going to get back to postseason and maybe championship form this year.
All right, from a young guy to a familiar face in a new place, that being Dillon Gabriel, lit things up at Oklahoma. You lose Bo Nix at Oregon, and everybody thinks, well, maybe there's a little bit of a fall off. Insert Dillon Gabriel, and it's not as if he comes in with an empty cupboard. The defense is lights out. And Ross, you have Jordan James in the backfield. You have Ted Johnson on the outside. I mean, this seems to be setting up for a year where Gabriel could come in and put up absolutely eye-popping numbers.
For sure. Another Dillon, and no pressure, right? As you mentioned, Bo Nix, just a Heisman finalist and a guy who set the NCAA passing record for completion percentage last year is who he'll be replacing. I don't know that any quarterback in the country returning has as much experience as this guy, Dillon Gabriel. 125 touchdowns in just 26 picks, third school, right? I mean, he's got a ton of starts under his belt, and like you said, he's got weapons. He's got certainly a good defense on the other side. Dan Lanning, the coach, has recruited incredibly well there in Oregon. They've really invested in the NIL program there when it comes to recruiting. But Oregon did lose their top running back, I think their top receiver, but they've got weapons, right? Tez Johnson, former Troy transfer, had 86 catches last year. Would expect him to kind of step up. But hey, Rick, don't overlook to the backup, right? He's got a good backup behind him. Dante Moore from UCLA started a few games for Chip Kelly. Really talented prospect as well. A good guy to learn behind for him is, of course, Dillon Gabriel with so much experience.
Yeah, and I think there's no question. It's always good to have a backup. Dan Lanning doesn't want more on the field this year unless it's in mop-up duty late in games when Oregon has a significant lead. Another veteran transfer, Will Howard, comes from Kansas State to Ohio State. Listen, Howard was remarkably productive, but Ross, when you look at the roster that Ohio State has around him, whether it's Henderson and Judkins in the backfield, a ludicrously loaded outside with the wide receivers, and a defense filled with guys that could have been NFL draft picks last year, I'm thinking that Howard, and I hate to use the term game manager, but I'm thinking that as long as he stays within the script, this is an offense that is going to potentially rewrite record books inside the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a ton of hype right around Ohio State for all the reasons you just mentioned. But there is one kind of question mark, right? And it is the quarterback position. They had all these guys return on defense, right? They've got a defense that is improved tremendously from a few years ago, and they've got incredible talent from the transfer portal on offense, all these weapons around the quarterback. But the quarterback position is the question. And can Will Howard impress like he did at Kansas State? Took Kansas State 2 years ago to the Big 12 title. Right? People kind of forget that they beat TCU, who ended up going on and playing for the national championship and beating Michigan in the route there. So he's got skills. He can do damage with his feet as well, and that obviously opens up a lane for any offensive coordinator, especially one as innovative and as creative as Chip Kelly. I'm not sure any starting QB, kind of has the dual kind of threat ability and the experience combo as we've seen from Will. But can he do it, right? So much pressure. We talk about the pressure on Ryan Day because of all these things, right? These returning players and just the talent and how much money they've invested in the roster. And there's a lot of pressure on Will Howard too. Right. I saw a headline recently. Will Howard must answer his doubters in 2024. So season's not even here, and the pressure is on for Will.
That is every year in Columbus. Ask Ryan Day. Ask any Ohio State coach that's ever been there before. The expectations are beat Michigan, win the Big Ten, and get to the national championship game. For the second straight year, Luke Fickell has gone to the portal and gotten a veteran quarterback. It was Tanner Mordecai. Now it's Tyler Van Dyke. What do we know about Van Dyke and how he may fit into this system that last year I don't think ever found its true identity? Was it a run first, then go to the air, or set up the run with the pass game? How does he fit into that style in 2024?
Yeah, we saw Van Dyke 3 years at Miami, right? We've got a lot to watch there. There's a lot of games there, and the games look different from year one to year 2 and 3. Yeah, and I don't know what it was, right? But we didn't see the Tyler Van Dyke in year 2 and 3 that we saw originally in year 1. It was kind of a roller coaster at Miami, and you wonder when that Van Dyke will come back, the one we saw in his first season when he kind of broke out there. Maybe it's under Phil Longo as offensive coordinator there at Wisconsin. Maybe it's his system. Maybe the fresh start will be something. But think about the stats. Year 1, I believe Van Dyke threw 25 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. The next 2 years, 26 touchdowns, 13 picks. Poor decision, sporadic moments. It was very odd, but he does have an advantage. I saw recently Luke Fickell called the most improved unit on Wisconsin's team is that offensive line. And obviously incredibly important for a quarterback, especially a new quarterback, to be behind an improved and experienced offensive line. They returned 3 starters there at Wisconsin, more than 100 career starts. So very important. So hopefully the fresh start, offensive line, all that stuff will lead to the Van Dyke that everybody saw in 2021.
Let's finish in East Lansing. Aiden Childs, not a familiar name to Spartan fans, but he certainly is to the new coach, Jonathan Smith, as they both come from Oregon State. He's a guy that seems to have a ton of potential, and obviously Smith is a guy who has shown his offensive acumen in what wasn't the easiest of situations up in Corvallis. Now with more resources, a heavy trip into the transfer portal in the offseason. What are you expecting from Aiden Childs?
Yeah, you said it right. All the potential in the world. You even hear from over the summer some NFL scouts point to him as a guy that they are watching, who's a top 15 ranked quarterback out of high school from California, signed with Oregon State, and played in spots last year for the Beavers. We didn't get to see him for long stretches, right? But played in spots and played well. 70% of his passes completed, 4 TDs, and no picks. He's still on the honeymoon of no interceptions. He seems like, Rick, that he's a inviting guy. He's kind of bonded with the team down there. We've read some things about comments from the players about how he's fit in. But there's no easy road here for Sparty, right? They get Ohio State, Oregon, in Michigan. But what really helps is he's used to the system, right? He's played in the system last year under Jonathan Smith at Oregon State. He knows the terminology. So that's going to always help, especially with that tough schedule.
Aiden Childs should be one of the more fascinating stories under center this season, though there are so many to cover. As I said at the start of the show, in a season that will truly be like none other in the history of the Big Ten and the history of college football. Ross just getting his history started. He's not going anywhere. He'll be with us after the break. Still to come here on Big Ten Today as well. Hawkeye insider Scott Dochterman on what's shaping up to be a legit QB competition in Iowa City, plus our training camp tour visiting the City of Angels for the latest on USC Trojan football. A season preview is on the way right after this. Time for the Big Stat presented by Old National Bank. It is USC's welcome gift to the Big Ten, one of the toughest schedules in all of FBS football. Now, for those thinking conspiracy theory, I can tell you these are all computer generated. At any rate, the Trojans will face the toughest schedule in the league and the 3rd most difficult in all of FBS football. Ashley Adamson, Jerry DiNardo, Yogi Roth got a look at the Trojans and have more on what to expect regardless of opposition.
Rick, thank you so much. Yeah, we were just talking about how that schedule is no joke for the USC Trojans. We're going to find out real fast how much progress they've made in this foundational year that Yogi's calling year 3 under Lincoln Riley. Fun to spend the day with the Trojans. I asked you when we were walking around practice, I said, what'd you see? And you said, I learned a lot. So what was your biggest takeaways?
You know, I think this program just has so much potential. I've always felt that way about USC. I think it's a great place. I think it's one of the great places in all of college football. It was great to be at practice. It's an offensive-driven team, you know, because the head coach calls the plays. And most of the time when teams are built like that with the head coach calling the plays, it takes an offensive emphasis. So that was pretty cool to watch. Defense, Coach Lynn's got a rebuild to do. There's no other way of saying it. If you look at the last 2 years of Coach Riley's recruiting, they're 4th in the Big Ten and 15th in the country. That'll only get better. They may never be 5 and they may never be 16. That'll only go up as he establishes himself here.
When you come to SC as a quarterback, I believe that you're a household name when you sign your letter of intent. When you start, you become a Heisman candidate. Every quarterback that Lincoln Riley has coached over the last handful of years has been either a Heisman winner or a Heisman candidate. Same deal for Miller Moss. I think in this system, though, he's different than all the guys he's coached in the past. I think he's so cerebral. I think he's going to be able to get the ball out, get it on time, and they have a vast array of weapons. Big takeaway for me, Ash, this receiving core is loaded. They need to get dramatically more play nationally. You're going to see it against LSU. Week 1, they will be on that stage, and I'm talking about Jacoby Lane, Deuce Robinson, we all know Zachariah Branch, Mekhi Lemon. These guys can roll. They got a variety of different skill sets. The other thing that stood out is big-time teams are built from the inside out. Jonah Monheim at center. This offensive line, I know you liked it. The defensive front, Bear Alexander. You look at Jamil Muhammad. They finally have a little bit of depth. They haven't had that over the course of the last 2 seasons. So I like where they sit heading into the midpoint of training camp.
And Yogi, having said all that, this offensive line, I believe, is very athletic. They have the ability to run or pass block. And at times, Lincoln may have to help his defense. It might have to be complementary football. And perhaps when he has a stronger defense, he would throw the ball. He may now, until that defense is built, he may rely on the run game some, because they're going to have to help the defense. That schedule that we looked at right before we started talking about this thing, you can't just put the defense out there for a bunch of plays.
Yeah.
That's, I think, a really good point around the schedule, because the one thing this team is still building towards is dramatic competitive depth. Right? We saw a couple of the teams around this conference that have that. I think there's 2 at the very top, Ohio State and Oregon, that have that. So pending that first half of the schedule, how healthy are they? I mean, LSU is going to be a physical matchup. You know, Michigan and Wisconsin and Penn State. But if they can get to that back end, mid-October through the rest of the season, they don't leave the Pacific time zone. So I think it puts them in a healthy position to finish really strong this season, continue the momentum that you referenced they've already built in recruiting.
And you mentioned, Coach, the Danson Len, he's got a rebuild here, and we saw the numbers from USC a year ago on the defensive side. He's a Penn State guy. He's a Big Ten guy. He talks about how excited he is that this is the conference that he loves, and he pinches himself thinking about the fact that he's going to be coaching Penn State in the Coliseum as the defensive coordinator of USC. What was your takeaway from spending some time with him and seeing kind of how he has infused some new energy and obviously talent into that side of the ball?
I mean, this is one of the bright assistant coaches in the country. In fact, I know you guys know this. Our first year at the Big Ten Network, he was a player at Penn State. So he's getting old. We're not getting old, but he is. He gets it. He understands the Big Ten. He's been around. He relates to the players. He's going to be very schematically sound, and he brings great enthusiasm. And I think this defense needs that. They need someone like Coach Lynn that they look up to, that they respect, that they want to follow. And this defense between coaching and recruiting is only going to get better.
And I think the middle of this defense, the heart of this defense when you're playing the Big Ten, to your point, I think they're really strong.
Yeah.
You look at the interior defensive line, Bear Alexander is the first name that jumps out. Anthony Lucas is another name that jumps out. You look at inside backer, Easton Mascarenas-Arnold, the transfer from Oregon State. Then Kamari Ramsey was one of the best safeties on the West Coast last year. So when he has that, his defense, and he talks about it all the time. He says obnoxious communication is the #1 trait. Just watching them at practice today, how they're communicating, how they're aligning, how they're trying to create chaos is fun. Now it's going to be matchups. Where does Eric Gentry go? What does Braylon Shelby do? What do some of these players that have unique skill sets, how does he utilize them in a variety of different matchups against different schemes?
Yeah, I thought their front seven had a good day today. I mean, when you look at the team, again, I have a lot of confidence in their offensive line. Their defensive line is probably one of the strongest parts. I wish they were a little deeper, but the front seven had a really good day. So this schedule is going to be difficult, and if you can win some of those battles in the box, it's going to help you.
Yeah. All right, last thing. When you think about a good season versus a great and truly special, memorable season here in Troy, what's going to be the difference?
I think it's going to be the tight games. I really think that the best teams, they go for it. Like, they lay it on the line. And I think playing at SC, I call it external expectations and internal reality. There's always huge external expectations. This is year 3 for Lincoln Riley. I think he's got a real handle on LA. And he talked to us about his team earlier. They have a handle on the mentality you need to play and thrive in LA when you are the show. So when it comes down to those little moments in critical games, can this team go for it? I think they will. I think they're built for it. Will they make all the plays? Probably Probably not. That's just how the seasons go. But I think that aggressive mindset is what this team needs, and I think they have it now on defense.
Yeah, I think you have to be careful how aggressive you want to be on offense. If throwing the ball a bunch is what you would consider being aggressive, I think the offense, to answer your question, actually, I think for it to work this year, the offense has to protect the defense just a little bit. I mean, Coach Lynn has got a big job, and they can't be on the field more than the offense. So maybe at a time when your roster is where you want it, you would throw the ball. When your roster is not where you want it, you might want to run it. Yeah. Not necessarily to move the ball. Of course, you want to move the ball, but you're thinking about the defense.
I think for offense, when you're thriving, you're dictating terms. And when you go back to watch Oklahoma tape or even year one at SC, they were really good when they ran the ball. And when they were able to move and pull offensive linemen.
Right.
Last year, they struggled there, Ash, on the offensive front. They tried to fill those holes in the portal. All of them didn't net out. There's a variety of reasons why it didn't work out. Part of it was the defense. Part of it was the score of the game. So, yeah, you're right. If they can run the football and dictate terms enough efficiently, remember, air raid, it's a philosophy, not a scheme. It's different than I think what a lazy take is on the Mike Leach offense. If they can run a little bit, to your point, and control it, they're going to be in games. And with Miller Moss in the fourth quarter, he'll have a chance to win them games.
Yeah. Well, and I just go back to what Danson Lynn did in 1 year at UCLA, his first year in college. He took over a defense that was ranked, I think, 87th at the end of 2022, and it was ranked 11th nationally by the time he was done there in 2023. So we'll see if he can do it across town here at USC. That's going to do it for us. Gentlemen, it's been fun hanging out.
Let's go.
Let's
Boards
go.
are waiting.
Yeah.
Get Coach in. Venice Pier.
We're headed to the beach, Rick.
I can tell you right now, Donardo with that tan doesn't want to leave L.A. and the beach. Let's go back and visit with Ross Dellenger for more on USC. Ross, I think 3 is the number that we're focused on right now with USC because they have the 3rd toughest schedule in FBS football. This is year 3 for Lincoln Riley, and I think it's easy to say, boy, Lincoln has to be feeling a ton of pressure. I'm sure he felt that the day that he walked in. Anytime you're coaching a USC Trojan football team, you have to be feeling the pressure to win.
Hold on, Rick. Where can I find a tan like that? I mean, wow. Donardo's been looking good, man.
He does look good.
It's a good life he leads, huh? You mentioned the pressure on Lincoln Riley. I think we all have to remember 3 years ago when he was hired and why he was hired and how he was hired, right? He signed a long contract. Right, at least 10 years. We don't know exactly. USC is a private school, but at least 10 years, $10 million a year in salary. That's a lot of money to buy out a coach. I don't know that USC has Texas A&M type cash to just buy out Lincoln Riley after year 3, and I wouldn't expect that anyway. But still, to get back to your question, there is pressure, right? There's pressure to win when you start. He raised expectations year 1, 11 wins, and then they lowered 8 in year 2, and you've got a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of investment that's been spent on making this work at USC, on making Lincoln Riley work at USC, and they talked a lot about there in that hit from LA about the defense, and that's been the bugaboo wherever Lincoln Riley's been, right? Oklahoma, we saw 3 straight playoff trips for Oklahoma and 3 straight losses in the playoff semifinals, mostly because of that defense. And they obviously fired Alex Crinch, made a change there last year at defensive coordinator with Lynn coming from UCLA. Will that be the answer? I don't know, but you look at that schedule, and as they mentioned there, it's scary, right? They have 3 road games, Rick, in a 4-week span: at Michigan, at Minnesota, and at Maryland. And that's a long flight, almost from coast to coast. 13,000 miles they'll have to travel round trip. It's tough sledding.
You mentioned those, and of course they have the season opener neutral site against LSU. Also in their first 6 games, and I know they're at home, but Penn State, Wisconsin, not going to exactly be pushovers for USC. Quickly, before we leave the Trojans, what do you think is considered success for this team in 2024? Do you have to be part of the 12-team college football playoff for Lincoln Riley to sit back at the end of the year and say, we did what we thought we were capable of doing?
Well, there are realistic expectations, right? And there are unrealistic expectations. I think Yogi mentioned it there. I liked what he said. There's a lot of external pressures and expectations, whether from the media or fan or LA community on USC, but there are internal realities. The reality with that schedule and kind of rebuilding, especially at the quarterback, new quarterback position, new defensive coordinator, the realities internally are probably not as high of expectation level as the outside. But I think given that schedule, right, getting to 9 wins in the regular season is probably pretty important. I would say that is a kind of normal expectation level considering all of the circumstances. Of course, I'm sure USC fans would say 10, 11, 12 wins, and you better make that playoff.
Yes, the expectations often slightly different from the fan base than they are from the coaches' rooms, and that's not just at USC. That is basically at every program in the country, save a couple of that last few years have been in the national title race each and every season. You likely know the Assistant Coach of the Year award is named after Frank Broyles, but at this rate, Iowa defensive coordinator Phil Parker may be a co-namesake. Best DC in the country has led Iowa to 8 straight seasons, allowing fewer than 20 points per game, the longest such streak in the country by a long stretch, and the longest in the Big Ten by a full 5 seasons. Now, the Iowa defense is seemingly never a question. Offense has been a different story as of late. A lot now expected of first-year OC Tim Lester, but by many accounts, Lester may not be relying on the quarterback we all expected to start the season. As former Northwestern signal caller Brendan Sullivan continues to push Cade McNamara for the job. And the man who sent that tweet, Scott Docterman of The Athletic, is today's guest for the big interview. Scott, I want to start there. You got a firsthand look at that quarterback competition. You've heard from others who have been watching it as well. What have you seen and what have you heard regarding this budding quarterback competition between Sullivan and McNamara?
It's something that's probably started back in June when Cade McNamara finally was healthy and cleared after his ACL tear last year. And there's been some questions as to how he can handle the new offense under Tim Lester. And I think through camp, that's really been a struggle for him. And I think a lot of it may be what his confidence level is in his knee. He's not necessarily pushing off and stepping with his left knee that he tore against Michigan State last year. And the other day when they had an open scrimmage, the first time that the public had a chance to look at it, he was 8 of 24, and he was late on a lot of passes. He was struggling getting the ball to players that were open. And I think when you look at Brendan Sullivan, however, and we all kind of remember what he was like in Northwestern, he wasn't great necessarily against a very good Iowa defense, but he was efficient. And at times he seemed to be more comfortable. He was able to kind of pick and pop where he needed to throw, make the makeables, as Iowa likes to say. So from what I've been hearing, and it was kind of confirmed on Saturday, that right now Brendan Sullivan is outperforming Cade McNamara.
Well, Scott, it's interesting because you bring up Tim Lester, obviously the change from Brian Ferentz, the oft-criticized former offensive coordinator. What kind of philosophical change do you expect to see under Tim Lester for a head coach that has been we've been here, we've done it, we are not going to vary from the script for a quarter century now of success in Iowa City?
I think the tenets and principles of Iowa will remain the same. They're going to be a blocking team. They're going to be a zone running team. But how they execute within the zone is completely different now. I mean, I saw a lot of plays, the makeup of those plays that were different. They use and incorporate a lot more motion, some RPOs, and if Brendan Sullivan wins the job, probably some zone read as well. And I saw some really well executed and designed plays. And then I think in the passing game, what we're seeing is a little bit more spacing. I think you're seeing more in tune with the play action to where the receivers are supposed to be on the field. And I've had some defensive assistants just kind of tell me, look, that this motion has done some wonders to our defense, and we've had to prepare differently for it because they've caused them some problems in their run fits. And as we know, Iowa's defense is always really good in that area. So it's really been helpful for the defense, but primarily I've seen a much better blocking team up front because the motion has enabled their linemen to reach their aiming points a little bit easier.
Scott, I don't want to simplify this too much, but the RPO, the zone read, Those are two things that Brendan Sullivan has done well. They're two things that doesn't necessarily fit inside the toolbox of Cade McNamara. Could it come down to a decision as simple as that? Listen, these are the plays on our sheet. One quarterback is simply better suited to do it than the other.
I believe that's going to probably be the case. I think Cade McNamara has built some equity within the program. Kirk Ferentz will give him an opportunity because he's not one to yank a quarterback for another, but I think he's going to look at who executes the offense better. And right now, that's clearly Brendan Sullivan. He has shown an ability to lead this team in small spurts and play well against a good defense. I think the thing that really caught my eye was in a 2-minute drill on Saturday. He was 5 of 6 passing and took the team right down the field against, again, a really good defense, whereas Cade just seemed to really struggle. I'm sure Kirk Ferentz will give him an opportunity, Cade McNamara, to work his rust off, to execute the offense. But ultimately, it's about winning games, and this is the type of year for Iowa where you push all your chips to the middle of the table. They have an elite defense returning. They've got a lot of good pieces, 151 career starts up front. They're the healthiest and best looking that they've been in years up front. They've got a good defensive backfield and a really good running back core. This is the year where you've got to push towards the college football playoff. And if Brendan Sullivan's your guy, I believe that's the way they're going to go.
Iowa has always had good years when they've had good centers. That's the case again this year with Logan Jones, unquestioned leader on that offensive line. But, Scott, the question remains explosives. What players on this roster, when opposing defenses go 8 in the box, because you know they are going to, can threaten on the outside and make this offense more than a one-dimensional unit?
That is going to be the biggest question outside of quarterback for this team, because we've seen it over the last 3 to 4 years that they haven't had the wide receivers to break those explosive plays. Now, they've got a bunch of guys who are pretty good athletes, and they're working within the system because it is, again, it's a new system. But I'm not so sure that any one singularly stands out. Perhaps Caleb Brown, who's suspended for the opener for an arrest in the offseason. There's a couple others. Seth Anderson, the son of Flipper Anderson, the former NFL wide receiver, who I think looks pretty good in parts, but he wasn't there on Saturday. He was a little dinged up. And Caden Weegan, who's an electrifying walk-on, very fast player. I think he can do some good things as well. And then finally, tight end Luke Lachey is one of the best in the country and probably would be in an NFL training camp right now if he hadn't broken his leg in his 3rd game. I think he's as good as any of the other preceding tight ends, and I don't say that lightly. He's got the skill set that everybody would really want. So if they can at least move the ball effectively to the wide receivers, stretch the field, and make plays out of the tight end, I think this running game will have the opportunity to execute for the best in its best season since 2020.
Scott, I think it's fascinating because no one talks about the job that Kirk Ferentz and Phil Parker do from a mentality standpoint, keeping this offense and defense together. The offense was the worst per play in the country last year. The defense was the best, yet we don't see any friction. How have they accomplished that?
It's almost miraculous if you think about it, Rick, because we've seen fractured teams and they usually go south. In this case, they pick each other up. And a lot of that is the respect that they have for Kirk Ferentz. Players on all ends, they believe in him. That's why they have one of the lowest attrition rates when it comes to transfers in the Big Ten and in the country. And they really respect one another. And I think it also stems from their leadership. And that's kind of year to year. A guy like Jack Campbell, who was the Butkus Award winner, passes that down to Jay Higgins. Completely different personalities, but they have the same leadership ability. And I think that's really something that's rare today. And I think Kirk Ferentz does a really good job of preaching, do your job. And the defense in some ways kind of relished it for a little bit, that hey, the game's always on us. But of course, I'm sure they would like a few more points too.
You know, I think Jay Higgins, he probably doesn't care, but he would like maybe a little bit more respect. I'm not sure how a guy who sets a program record and is the FBS's leading tackler doesn't get the individual attention. Maybe it's because the team around him is also so good. How good can Higgins be this year? Can he be even better than he was, as productive as he was in 2023?
I think he could be a better player, and I think he'd like to have 40 fewer tackles. Because the one thing is, you mentioned about yards per play. Iowa led the country in that category and had 196 more defensive snaps than number 2, which was Penn State. So if you can remove some of that wear and tear off of him, I think it'll make him a much more effective player, and that really stems on the offense. But, one of the things he doesn't do, he's not necessarily a blitzer. He's a strict middle linebacker, and as we know, we love statistics. We love sacks, and we love interceptions. And tackles are just kind of tackles, but he is the unquestioned leader of this team. He has a great bubbly personality that really everybody responds to, and his cohort, Nick Jackson, is only 115 tackles shy of setting the FBS record because he had 4 years at Virginia and he enters his second year at Iowa.
You also have Y.A. Black, Sebastian Castro. I mean, we're talking about a defense that returns over 100 starts from just last year and 9 guys who made at least 6 starts. They could be off the charts good, but there's still one question to answer, Scott, right? And it's the narrative that Iowa benefited and got to the Big Ten championship game on multiple occasions because they played in the weaker West. How important do you think it is to the players that are on this team that have been to those championship games to have the kind of year this year in a divisionless Big Ten that would erase that narrative from being any part of the conversation?
I'm sure they would love it. I do also think, though, that the schedule will play a role for Iowa. When you look at it, they do go to Columbus, and that's going to be an awfully big task for them, but they don't play Oregon, Penn State, or Michigan. So I think people will automatically look at, hey, well, you played Washington, but Washington was down, or you went to UCLA and not USC. But I think in some respects, it is a little bit overblown. Last year, there's no question that they were not among the top 3 teams in the Big Ten, and they benefited from a down West division. But this was the only program in the West that beat every team in the East during that 10-year block and had the best cross-divisional record of any team in the West division. So they've been comfortable playing those teams. They were successful before the division structure, but I do think that they have a point to prove. And if the offense can come around, if quarterback, whether it's Brennan Sullivan or Cade McNamara, can make strides and they can stay relatively healthy, this is a team we're going to be talking about, Rick, in late November as a possible college football playoff contender.
Scott, you make some great points. As long as you and I have both been in this business, we know that reality and perception don't necessarily always work in a straight line together. Scott Dochterman, great stuff as always on the Iowa Hawkeyes. We appreciate the time.
Yeah, thanks, Rick.
We have much more on that stout defense, the QB competition, and all things Iowa football, including practice video and exclusive interviews coming your way later with the Training Camp Tour Iowa Football Show. The debut airing set for Friday, August the 16th at 8 Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. Will Iowa be among Ross's dark horses to start 2024? And who else joins the Hawkeyes on the list of the overlooked? Those answers and much more still to come here on Big Ten Today. Ross and the College Football Inquirer podcast crew recently discussed dark horses inside the newly divisionless Big Ten. Some fascinating teams listed. Iowa, always perceived, as Scott and I discussed, as a beneficiary of Western bias. Nebraska, which hasn't won a conference crown in a quarter century. And Rutgers, which suddenly appears to be a trendy pick among college football insiders. Welcome Ross Dellenger back into the show. And let's start with the Iowa Hawkeyes since we just finished that conversation with Scott Dochterman. Ross, we're not sure who the quarterback will be. We are sure this defense will be among the nation's best. I asked about erasing any of that thought that it was just because they were in the West. Scott threw out some great stats, the success they had against the East. Do you think they can have success in this new look 18-team Big Ten in year one?
Well, it is going to be a lot about the quarterback, right? Which does seem like a question mark as we are in the middle here of preseason practice. But I do have Iowa as one of my dark horses, and I think part of it is putting stock in the new offensive coordinator Tim Lester and whoever the quarterback might be, and having more success. They don't need to do too much, Rick. I mean, this defense in the special teams has been some of the best in the country. And I think Scott talked about it, but 80%, they returned 80% of their tacklers from last year. It's like top 10 in the country, and ton of O-line starters back as well. I think over 60% of their offensive yards return as well. So they're going to have returners, they're going to have great defense, they're going to have great special teams. But can they have a quarterback, right, who can throw for better than 60% of his completion, which is they haven't had in a long time. I think almost 10 years since that happened. So the question mark remains on the quarterback position in the offense. Can they at least score, Rick, 23, 24 points a game? If they can maybe make the playoff.
I think Rutgers, another team that fits that bill if they get good play from the quarterback position. Of course, it'll be Ethan Kaliakmanis, a former Minnesota quarterback who is now the presumed starter on the banks. But Ross, they have everything else, including talent, including experience, and a team that Greg Schiano really believes in them. Apparently, you believe in the Scarlet Knights as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you said his name, the quarterback. I was going to have trouble. I was just going to call him the Greek Rifle. I know
that works.
That's his nickname from Minnesota. They're certainly going to need him to improve, right, on some of the stats in the play at Minnesota. He was a solid player, but they're probably going to need a little more out of them. What makes Rutgers different? It's kind of like the opposite of Iowa in a way, right? Iowa's no longer in the Big Ten West, and that's kind of a negative for them. Rutgers no longer in the Big Ten East, a positive. They don't get Ohio State, Rick. They don't get Michigan. They don't get Oregon, and no Penn State. Now, they do have some games like USC and an improved Nebraska team, and they do have to travel to Virginia Tech, which some people think is a sleeper. But they've got all the pieces. Specifically, they've got a veteran team. Does that matter anymore in the age of transfer portal? I think it does. Over 80% of their offensive yards return, over 120 starts on the offensive line. And there's just something, Rick, about Greg Schiano in Rutgers, right? Last year, but he led them to their first winning season in over a decade. I mean, this was a program that just a few years ago lost 21 straight Big Ten games. So a lot on the shoulders of Kyle Monangai at running back. Obviously led the Big Ten in rushing, and he's a big reason why Rutgers is one of my sleepers.
Lastly, you had Nebraska listed as a dark horse as well. We already discussed the incoming quarterback in Dylan Raiola, but they have some questions to answer. Is this the year, the most important question to answer, that Nebraska gets back to the postseason and potentially contends for a conference title?
Yeah, can they win the close games? Gosh, we saw it under Scott Frost, just a terrible record in one-score games, and then again last year, Matt Rule's first season, 5 games where they lost within one score. Just a brutal late stretch there. Had a chance to beat Wisconsin, Iowa, Maryland, and kind of threw them away late. Couldn't close out those games. So can they do it with a freshman quarterback? Can they close out those games? I think they can, right? You look at Matt Rule's track record, his second year at places, right? Second year at Temple took him from 2-10 to 6-6. Second year at Baylor, 1-11 to 7-6. So add 4 wins to Nebraska's record last year, Rick. We're looking at 9-3, and that's the average that we've seen. And Tony White, by the way, I wanted to mention him, defensive coordinator. 3-3-5 defense has been nasty. Nebraska was in those games late last year because of his defense. But as I mentioned earlier, got to improve that -17 turnover margin.
Funny that you bring up 9-3. It seemed like every year that Bo Pelini was the head coach, Nebraska finished 9-3. That's why some folks affectionately dub September the 3rd as Bo Pelini Day. It has been a long time coming, but we will finally see a 12-team playoff this season. First round to be played on campus between seeds 5 through 12. Quarters will see the winner of those games against the top 4 seeds in traditional bowl game settings before the semifinals and national championship game will be played in mid to late January. Anyone who loves college football loves thinking about what the college football playoff could be like. And Ross, in a sense, would love to finish 5 through 8 because that means that you would get to host the first ever set of college football playoff games on your campus. How much of a discussion do you think that's been among college football coaches and the playoff committee heading into this year?
Yeah, it has been. When they were trying to, the last 2 or 3 years, they were crafting this 12-team playoff format. One of the big questions was, do we expand home field, right? Right now, the first 4 teams, the first 4 games, first round, are played at home field or on-campus stadiums. But then it goes into a rotation of bowls for the quarterfinals. The bowls will host the quarterfinal games and the semifinal games. So if you're a top 4 seed, Rick, you get a bye. You don't have to play in that first round, and that's great, right? You avoid injury, you avoid a loss, but you don't get to host a playoff game. And that's been an issue for some ADs and some commissioners, even on the format on the playoff committee. It's certainly going to be interesting down the line when we see how exciting and how incredible and the pageantry to these home college football playoff games are, especially there in the Big Ten, right? Could you imagine the weather? Could you imagine a game in State College, Happy Valley, in mid-December, in Ann Arbor in mid-December, there in Iowa, snow, blizzards, all the elements? Could be a lot of fun, and I think you're going to see enough excitement to maybe have a real conversation about, should we expand on the home field?
And should we expand further? I've talked to all the coaches. They say, for now, can we just enjoy 12? We want to be part of 12. We'll enjoy 12. If we have to go to 16 or beyond, we shall see. Great stuff from Ross Dellenger. Ross, thanks for being with us today. Also, thanks to our guest, Scott Docterman of The Athletic. And thanks to you for hanging with us on another edition of Big Ten Today. That'll wrap it up for Wednesday, but we are back same time, same channel on Thursday morning. See you then.